Welcome! Today, I just wanted to talk about 3 topics that captivate me: the spatial dimensions, artwork, and Deltarune. I don't know, guys. I just kind of feel like there might be so many concepts in science and metaphysics that might be so deeply interwoven into the game that we're not really looking at because we're all so distracted on sussing out all the characters. And I'm just here to do the job that nobody asked for and lay these maybe important, maybe not too important concepts out on the table for you all. Also, there's a really good video out there by Trick Theory that explains the dimensions and the science behind gas stars shattering across space and time really thoroughly. So I highly recommend you guys check that out too. And I'm just here to provide an artistic perspective on everything. Also, real quick, thank you to everyone who commented the Deltarune lore that I missed last video. As someone who has major difficulty remembering things, I appreciate it so much. Now that that's out of the way, let's dive in! While playing Deltarune or even Undertale, you may have wondered to yourself, what even is this red heart that we see the moment that we boot the game? And how exactly does the soul connect to our world and control Kris? Is it all trivial video game shenanigans? Or is there a logical explanation that makes sense? Well, how about I propose a theory here on its physical nature? Picture this. The soul controlling Kris is an interdimensional object that spans multiple dimensions across space and time. Okay, I know, it totally sounds like I pulled some random science terms out of nowhere, but please, hear me out. The topic of dimensions and even the theoretical 4th spatial dimension isn't new to Deltarune actually. One of the basic shapes mentioned in Toriel's classroom is a 4th dimensional object, the hyperdodecahedron. Is this a funny hee-hee-ha-ha, or does this shape have more significance? I personally think it's just a silly flavor text in this specific context, but considering its cosmological significance in our world, I would not be surprised at all if it was deeper than a hee-hee-ha-ha. But that's besides the point of this video. We're talking about dimensions here, not dodecahedrons. First off, let's just start with defining dimensions. We can't dive into Deltarune just yet until we're both on the same plane here. So if you don't mind, dear students, let me introduce you to the world of geometry. So you may be asking, what even is a dimension in the first place? Well, a common misconception in pop culture is that it's an alternate world or parallel universe, but in science, its definition is completely different and honestly kind of hard to explain. Dimensions can be described as a unique physical quantity or direction one can travel. Our world is a fabric weaved from 4 dimensions, 3 spatial dimensions, X, Y, and Z, and 1 time dimension that flows only one way, T. And each dimension has its fundamental shapes. The 0th dimensions is a point. The 1st dimensions is a line. The 2nd dimensions is a square. And the 3rd dimensions is a cube. Multiple points form a line, multiple lines form a square, and multiple squares form a cube. So let's say you were living inside of these dimensions. How exactly would you move? Well, in the 0th dimension, you can't move at all. When you add a dimension, you can move left and right. Add another, you can move left, right, up, and down. And add one more, you can move left, right, up, down, forward, and backward. So while the gears are turning in your head, you might be wondering, what even is a 4th dimensional object, and what do they even look like? Wow! How about I explain using inspiration from this book right here? So you want to see the 4th dimension. Sorry to disappoint, but none of us will ever be able to comprehend the true form of any higher dimensions. But good news, or horrifying news, I don't know. 4th dimensional beings can pass segments of themselves through our world. So that's how we're gonna visualize their dimension. Step by step, progressively moving up using this flatlands analogy. So starting with the 1st dimension, if a 2D circle were to enter their world, it would appear as a 1D line that changes length as the circle moves along the y-axis. Similarly, if a 3D sphere were to enter the 2D world, it would appear as a flat circle that changes diameter as the sphere traverses the z-axis. Following this pattern, it's been theorized that a 4D hypersphere would appear as a 3D sphere as it enters our world that changes volume as it moves along the 4th dimension. And that's because a hypersphere isn't faceted out of 1D lines like a circle or 2D planes like a sphere. It's comprised out of 3D spheres. Whoa. And everything I've showed you is just with the simplest shapes. Just imagine how absolutely mind-breaking and wacky any 4th-dimensional object more complicated than a hypersphere would appear in our world. Fun fact, this is why biblically accurate angels often appear in artwork as visually confusing and horrifying as they do. It's all because these angels originate from a higher plane of existence with laws of nature that we cannot comprehend. So they appear as visually mystifying as a higher dimensional object and have to soothe us puny 3rd-dimensional life forms with the words, "Be not afraid." How am I not supposed to be afraid? You have 50 rotating eyes and are undulating at me. Stop undulating! Wait a moment. I'm feeling a crazy sense of deja vu here. Oh dear God. Oh, it's all just a bad dream. Alright, where was I? There are many creators in history who have tried to depict interdimensionality through their art. For instance, depicting higher dimensions, or the interaction between different ones, or even the medium itself acknowledging the dimensions that are outside of it. I'm not gonna dive too deep into other video games, but you might have already heard about or maybe even played Super Paper Mario, which is a game where Mario, who harnesses the power to traverse both the 2nd and 3rd dimension, is the prophesized legendary hero that will stop the looming interdimensional void from engulfing every single world and all of existence itself. Absolute masterpiece of a game, by the way. Besides that, there's actually been entire artistic movements like Cubism and Dimensionism, which seeks to portray unseen dimensions outside of our physical reality. May I briefly read this excerpt from the Dimensionist Manifesto, written in 1936 by Hungarian art theorist Charles Seurat and signed by many prominent artists worldwide. The Dimensionist tendency has led to literature leaving the line and entering the plane, painting leaving the plane and entering space, sculpture stepping out of closed immobile forms, and after this, a completely new art form will develop. Cosmic art. Did you guys understand any of that? Is your brain still intact? Please stay with me. Don't worry, I'll be your guide. So let's dive into the world of interdimensional artwork and try to connect some shared concepts to Deltarune. Metamorphosis 2 is a long horizontal art piece by M.C. Escher, the artist notable for illustrating optical illusions. Metamorphosis transforms 1D lines to 2D tessellations to 3D objects and then backwards. This segment right here particularly is so reminiscent to me of the Dark World, with the chessboard transforming into a town, and the name Metamorphosis itself reminds me so much of Jevil. If you don't mind me putting on my crazy theorist tinfoil hat here for a moment, please allow me to analyze this art piece with a gaming lens. Lately, I've been trying to teach myself how to code, and I've formed an interesting connection here. This segment portraying the 1st dimension reminds me of lines of code, all of these, that all come together to form the individual objects within a script, kinda like all of these ones. And that assemblage of objects come to form the big picture that the players see, the program or game. And despite all of this probably being a huge hacking coincidence, I think the connection is quite fascinating. Also, it leads into the idea that if there is a basic rudimentary dimension in Deltarune, it could be the script and programming itself, which checks out with this mysterious person that's lost inside of the code. And to take an even more absolutely unhinged gamer conspiracy theorist take on this piece, sorry MC Escher, one could even say that these squares right here are like pixels that come together to form sprites.
And with that thought, may I present my very academic
theory of hypothetical video game dimensions. So for your typical 2D RPG, the 0th dimension might be the code, the 1st dimension could be the pixels, The second dimension could be the sprites, and the third is 3D, like our world. And so, us, the players, all live in the third dimension that lies beyond the screen, aka their fourth wall. And the worlds of Deltarune takes place primarily in this 2D sprite dimension, with the characters only being able to move up, down, left, and right. And we, in the third dimension, look down onto their worlds, watching quite creepily from the outside. Hold on a moment. I've heard about something like this before. Why don't you take it away, Neil and Chuck from the Star Talk podcast?
So here's what I want to tack onto this, though. They would know how to observe us, but how would we ever be able to observe them?
If they're higher dimensions,
yes, they're the higher dimensions.
They could observe us, and we would not even know they were there.
Never even know they were there.
Correct.
So then, okay. And so then, what we would only be able to observe is what they are able to put into our.
No, not to put into it, but to pass through it.
Not put in, but pass through.
Correct.
Our reality.
Yes.
So we would observe that we would never be able to observe their universe. Period.
Unless we had access out of our dimensions to their dimension. That's correct.
Wow.
Now, here's something interesting. Ready?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Couldn't have worded it better myself.
Moving forward, to return to my totally plausible and believable and not crazy at all sounding theory of gamer dimensions, the spatial dimension lower to the 2D worlds of Deltarune could be the individual pixels that come together to form all of the sprites. It's almost kind of like how a flat 2D square is comprised out of 1D lines. But because this is a video game, instead of lines, they'd be pixels. Wait a moment. Pixels? No, it can't be. The stray pixels in every chapter are...
Out of my way! Out of my way! Can't you see he's gonna kick my butt? Hi there, young people. Nice day today.
Moving on from all of that absurdity, may we try to explain the physical nature of the soul inside of Chris by ascending to an artwork about the fourth dimension. This is Crucifixion, Corpus Hypercubus, painted by Salvador Dali, the multi-clocks guy with the sick mustache. This painting is a portrayal of the crucifixion. However, instead of painting the usual 3D cross, it depicts it as a fourth-dimensional hypercube, binding Jesus without him appearing to be bound by anything at all because the cross extends outside of our third dimension. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like there's something about this piece, and especially that invisible, otherworldly force and feeling of just utter futility that it invokes, that feels so strangely familiar. I really wonder what Chris would think about it if they were to ever, pass by it at like a school trip to the art museum. Back to throwing 4D hyper spaghetti at the fifth wall, what if Chris's soul is an interdimensional object that extends through two different spatial dimensions? Deltarune's 2.5D one that lives inside the screen, and our 3D one that's outside of it. And the soul connects them while manifesting physically in the Deltarune universe as a simple red spray of a heart. And maybe this red heart has outer dimensional strings attached to it, leading into our world, kind of like a puppet. And strings. Like strings of code? I don't know, there might be a double entendre here too. So when Spamton alludes that Chris is a puppet and that they're controlled by strings, it isn't simply a metaphor for being the player character. It may be true in a literal sense as well. I guess us, the players, are kind of like an alien puppeteer to them. And you're probably asking how this interdimensional soul could even be created in the first place? Not to pull out the Gaster card, but I'm gonna pull out the Gaster card here. The man shattered across space and time. He is likely already multidimensional across all of the spatial dimensions himself. He could have modified a soul and added some wacky strings to it and fed those strings into our world for us to control. Like, ooh, you want to play my game, that's silly man behavior. Also, he's probably consuming a carton of eggs within the 4th dimension, and you're watching me tirelessly making this video, and you, yes, you, listening to it as we speak. Everyone, don't ignore him. Go on, say hi. Oh, there he goes again. One day we'll catch him. Finally, the huge mystery here is, whose human soul is it originally? Could it be the implanted soul from an alternate universe stick-wielding child possessed by their snarky ghost friend? Or perhaps it's an artificial one, generated at the hands of the program surveyor himself. Or is it just Chris's? Some of these suggestions beg the question, can humans even feasibly live with multiple souls inside of them? Or even souls that aren't their own? And taking into account the power of the human soul, what are the physical implications for a human to possess multiple? My personal thoughts on this are, considering that Chris is the only human in Hometown, therefore the only character in Deltarune with a human soul, following the principle of Occam's razor, I would think that it's simply just Chris's original soul inside of them that's been modified, allowing it to be manipulated by outside forces since before the events of the game. After all, when you take into account its potential interdimensional qualities, it's not necessary for other characters to be literally amalgamated inside of them for other forces to gain control. All those outside individuals need are the strings that are attached to it. But there's another question to answer here. If it's their soul, and only their soul, how can they still move after removing it, and why are they struggling so much to even stay up? What if that's the entire reason why they're so slow and zombie-like? After removing their own soul to finally gain agency for once, what if they're mustering the very last of their remaining willpower inside of their body to even move? And after putting themselves through the visceral trauma of ripping their own soul out, they have no choice but to put it back in since it's the only one they've got. From these circumstances, a paradoxical cycle emerges. Extract, put back. Rip out, return. Disconnect, then reconnect. Time and time and time again. And thus, despite everything, they're still a puppet on a string. Hello, it's Log! Oh my god, thank you so much for sticking all the way to the end. I'm sorry for overloading you with so much information, but I at least hope you found this maybe educational or entertaining. At least one of those two. Do you have a favorite game, art piece, film, or literature where characters interact with multiple dimensions or the dimensions outside of their media? I know I already mentioned it, but I really loved Super Paper Mario as a kid. Every time I remember the characters or the story, I feel like tearing up like a little baby. Like, that's how special that game was to me. And as a kid, all the dimensional shenanigans flew right over my head, but now that I understand it a little more, it makes the game so much more special than it already was. Also, thank you for listening to me yap for so long about nerd science stuff. This video may or may not have been an excuse for me to talk about physics and art and the dimensions, and you may or may not have fallen directly right into my trap. Ha. In all seriousness, I had a blast making this video, and all I hope for is that you all had fun watching it. And also, please keep commenting your Deltarune theories and opinions. I really like reading them. Take care and stay determined, everyone.